nashindwa na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika. Nashindwa na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika.
My name is David Brush. I served in the Peace Corps in Tanganyika, Africa. We served from 1964 to 1966, and our primary work was road building. Somewhere as the Peace Corps I had heard about, I guess, maybe at junior college someplace, maybe there was something, maybe it's something I read, but somewhere it hit me that sounds like something I'd like to do. And I remember I actually sent the application in, did all the preliminary stuff, but I actually said in my application, when you accept me or give me an offer of a program, I'll let you know for sure that I want to go. Because I had some questions in my mind. I mean, this was not leaving and going. I mean, going overseas in the Navy was easy. You have your whole ship with you, you've got your crew with you, you've got your friends with you, your buddies. The Peace Corps was, you're leaving home, a small group, and you're going out into who knows where. So I was interested, but not quite committed. It was maybe 3 months, 4 months had passed after I had sent the application in, and I don't really remember now the process, but whatever it was. And I was working for Dayton T. Brown, and that was the time that Kennedy got assassinated. And that the memory is crystal clear because we were at work. I was at Dayton T. Brown. We were at work when the news came through, and it even affects me right now. I still feel emotional about that. I really was a Kennedy fan, if that's the right word to say. I don't think that's quite right, but I believe he was just such a great man. And right there that day when the news came that he had been, shot, assassinated, it was just like, God, I mean, I remember everything from the engineers, the technology, everybody at the company was just like, well, what can you do? I mean, it was, it was like a crushed feeling, and we were just mumbling, sort of, well, what can you do? What can you do? And all of a sudden, I said, I know what I can do. I can get it together and do it. And I mean, the Peace Corps, it suddenly hit me. I mean, that was his baby, and I can do it. And I don't know if it was the next day or when, but within a day or two, I had sent a letter or a phone call, again, I don't remember how, but saying, any place, anytime, I'm ready. And Zamo, Tanganyika, Project 4, was there within, it was a pretty short period of time, and I was scared. I mean, I was thinking, okay, I'm ready anywhere, anytime. Brazil, Colombia, South America, France, Germany, Africa. But yeah, I was committed though. And it was just led into the awesome adventure of the Peace Corps itself. Leaping ahead, I think the biggest change for me was almost instantly realizing how much Africa was just like home. I mean, it really was. I mean, when you took the lions out, the rhinoceros out, the killer bees, the army ants, and just left the people. I mean, I hung out with 5-year-olds there like I did at the University of Florida, and the same. Everything was the same. I mean, basically, right down to the basics. It was just people, and they were awesome. The most difficult thing for me in the training was the language. And I apparently have a very, very low ability in language. And I hear things, and it's very difficult for me to comprehend it and return it. So conversational Swahili, I mean, 12 guys could go around this conversation table saying this new phrase, and I still wouldn't be able to say it when I got to me. I'd have to look down and write it, you know, and then maybe I could say it if I could visually see it. And so I struggled immensely with the language. And fortunately, being that I had the technical background, I had some advantage over some of the other students, not students, other volunteers, because some others had background in history and non-engineering fields. So I had the engineering mechanical background, which made those areas easy, or easier. And I was able to focus more on the language, because I forget our program development director's name.
Miwa?
Miwa, yes. He pinned me down about halfway through and said, basically, David, don't worry about anything but the language. You know, you're going to make it on everything else. You got to get that minimum. We had to pass that minimum, I don't know, was it State Department exam type thing, or Foreign Service, I guess. Foreign Service minimum standard for a language. And so that was tough. The language was tough for me, and I struggled with it. And I was fortunate in the long run, because when I got to Africa, I was assigned in different areas, or in remote type areas, where Swahili was spoken a lot more than the English, although we always had the English backup, almost always. And so my language got developed very well there, because I was immersed, or immersed, or had to learn it. Especially, it almost seems weird to say, but really fun, but kind of scary too, was the army ants. I mean, we ran into them a number of times. We could just see a column of them, maybe 4 inches wide, that just, and they really do. They march like it's a dang regiment. I mean, and we kind of experiment one time, and you see this column going, and if you're dumb, you put your foot down in the middle of them to see what happens. But if you take a stick and stick it there, the ones that have already passed the stick turn around like on command and charge back to where the stick came into the column. The rear ones charge forward, and they go right after that stick. Of course, if you're dumb and put your foot there, that's happening to your foot. Or whatever, you know, some animal in the nature. But they move. I mean, you read about these things in papers and books and textbooks, but the army ants move like in a huge blanket across the land. They destroy everything in its path. And this is what you read, quote. And I mean, there's famous adventure stories where the people lose their farm because the army ants come charging through. And Walter and I can say it because Walter and I were there at Kahama, our little concrete block house with screens on it, and the army ants came. I mean, they were sweeping through, and we were right in their path. And I don't remember how we first noticed. I guess ants started biting us when we were sitting there drawing up our bridge plans or whatever we were doing. And it was nighttime, and we, I guess, obviously noticed and looked, and just the land surrounding the cottage was just black, moving, rumbling with ants. And I have to back up slightly. They came in, I guess, the back door, and we saw them before they surrounded us, because I think we ran out the front door and looked and could see this huge wave like coming, and it was already touching part of the building. And we ended up, again, we'd heard stories about what they do, and for some reason Walter and I, we got the idea that let's see if we can keep them from getting completely in, because otherwise you couldn't sleep there, or had to, you know, we wouldn't be able to stay there. So I think we took paraffin, the oil for our little lamps and stuff, put a little thing around the perimeter of the building, but quickly found out as soon as you tried to walk through them, I mean, you know, this was fairly early before we had learned a lot. I mean, this is still, it was like we were putting this foot in trying to walk in them, you know, really dumb. But then we learned real quick, with our big hiking boots that were good for not to have snakes bite you, you know, the ones that went up to almost to your knees, we put them on and rubbed paraffin on the outside of them, and found out we could walk through them then because they didn't like the chemical, you know, this thing. So we ended up keeping most of them out of the house, but they completely surrounded the house and just moved on, and it was just an amazing thing to see. So I can see where you hear stories and accounts where if a dog is chained up and can't run, they disappear. I mean, they're gone. They're dead. They're eaten, and any other small animal. And
did you stay in your house that night?
Yeah, we did. We were able to stay. I think it took, again, I to sit down with Walter. Maybe it took an hour, maybe 2 hours for the entire ant wave to move.
In the middle, and you were surrounded by ants in the house.
Yeah, but they weren't focusing on the house. The house was in their path, and they just kept right on going. But it just took that long for the time the first forward part of this entire, I don't know what they call it, hive, army, yeah, of ants, but it was a den of moving. So they just kept right on marching or moving, and when they left, they left. You know, I mean, none stayed behind. I mean, maybe one or two. I mean, they got lost or something. But they didn't. It wasn't like they stayed. They were gone. A couple hours, they were gone. But I do remember, and that's the reason I remembered the third party member, because we were doing some surveying, road surveying, to locate the slope of the land, so we know the water flow to help locate bridges and culverts, etc. And the name almost came to me, but our third member was carrying the surveying, I'm going to have to say stick, because the name, or pole, because the proper terminology is not with me, although, and then Walter or I must have been on the theodolite, which was our instrument for getting the angle and the distance to the marker pole. But old third party man was doing his duty into the bushes there, holding his stick, and all of a sudden, hold still! And he's jumping up and down and hollering and running, and finally drops the stick and is running around. He was standing still on a home of army ants, or a column marching by, and they had gotten up his legs before he knew what was going on, and there was no way he could stand still. And I think Walter and I laughed for half an hour rolling around, and he didn't appreciate it at all. He was pretty chewed up. Those army ants can really give you a good little nip. And it's not like our little red ants or other ants in the States are a nuisance, but those army ants, they're mean little suckers.
Malaika, nami nifanyeje? Kijana mwenzio, nashindwa na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika. Nashindwa na mali sina we, ningekuoa malaika.